It's the right way to start this video. I got it. That's why I call my thing the marathon, because I'm not gonna lie and portray this ultimate poise like I've been had it figured out. Nah, I just didn't quit. That's the only distinguishing quality between me and anybody else who going through this, went through this, or is gonna go through this. I didn't quit. Nipsey Hussle. The subject of today's video seemed to take a page out of Neighborhood Nip's book. He ran his race with unrelenting willpower until he made it to the highest level. Like Nip, he didn't rush the process. He followed the steps and laid the groundwork. From getting passed over by D1 schools on multiple occasions to being a member of the team featured on Netflix hit show Last Chance U, and seeing pretty much zero notable camera time. All those cameras, yet he was overlooked again. Still, he managed to turn every single one of these less than ideal situations into an opportunity. So much so to the point that when his opportunities came, he was ready to take full advantage of every single one of them. This is the story of Damion Willis and how he went from Last Chance U reject to NFL starter in only 4 years. Cue the wang. Damion Willis was raised by his mom in Jackson, Mississippi. He began his football career as a quarterback, using his athletic ability to run around and make plays. It was the easiest way to get the ball in his hands, and once it was there, good things would typically happen. However, by the time Damion's sophomore season rolled around, he was far from the best quarterback on his team. And since typically only one guy at that position plays, the future pro had been relegated to the bench. He decided, instead of just complaining about not getting playing time, to actually look at the situation and come up with a viable solution. In this case, that solution was to change positions, and that would change the trajectory of Damion's football career unlike he ever could have predicted. He approached his wide receiver coach and told him that he wanted to make the change to wide receiver. His coach, immediately testing him, told Damion to meet him the next day at 9 a.m. sharp on the field. When the coach pulled up, Damion was already there, he was loose, he was ready to go. And it was on that day in the 10th grade when Damion began to learn the skills that would eventually carry him all the way to the NFL. Damion was a natural, and it didn't take him long to become a starter at his new position. But he wasn't happy just being on the field, as you'll see throughout the course of this story. This man never settles for good enough. He wants to be the best, and when he says it, he actually means it, and you can tell if somebody means it based on the work that they put in. He attacked his new position with a ferocity that led him to gain over 1,000 receiving yards in his first year that he switched, and in each year after that. His final season, he grabbed 48 receptions for just under 1,200 yards and scored 17 touchdowns. By the end of his senior year, Damion stood 6'3", weighed 185 pounds, and you think colleges would be just knocking down his door at this point. Unfortunately, he was still relatively unknown, but there was a big school not too far from the field where Damion first honed his skills at the wide receiver position, and they came calling. Ole Miss. The only issue is that by the time Ole Miss contacted Damion, which was pretty late in the recruiting process, they only had one scholarship left that was available. And unfortunately for him, Damion wasn't their first choice. He was pretty much playing B or maybe even playing C for the final scholarship that they had. Their first choice, 4-star recruit DeMarcus Lodge. Now DeMarcus had offers from LSU, Texas A&M, USC, Alabama, just to name a few. So there were definitely no guarantees that he'd choose Ole Miss. All he had to do was pick any other school, and boom, Damion was an Ole Miss rebel, and this story is a lot different. In that version of the story, Damion goes to Ole Miss, shows what he can do, eventually plays next to DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. A dynamic trio comes into the NFL draft this year as Damion goes 3rd, 4th round. Instead, DeMarcus Lodge picks up an Ole Miss hat, puts it on his head, and that set into motion this long chain of events. Let's go. At this point, Damion was back to square one. Now there were smaller schools like Louisiana Tech, Louisiana Monroe. These guys wanted Damion at their school, but Damion was convinced that he was a D1 talent and he wanted to go D1 because he felt like that was his best opportunity to further his career and make it to the NFL. As he sat there weighing his options, he got a call from the University of Cincinnati. Smaller school, still D1 1A though. It was good news, but unfortunately the exact same situation again. One scholarship left, multiple wide receiver options, Damion the last choice. Now Cincinnati was pushing forward. They scheduled Damion to come on a visit, but a couple days before he was scheduled to make the trip, you already know what happened. The wide receiver Damion was competing for that final spot with came in, swiped that final scholarship offer, and just like that, Damion's D1 hopes were done. In case you're wondering, the receiver that ended up taking that final spot was a cat named Khalil Lewis. He ended up going to Cincy, and for 3 straight years, he led the team in receiving, so it definitely wasn't a bad pickup. He was actually signed to the Seahawks, who coincidentally the Bengals just played, but he did not end up making the final 53-man roster and was recently released. As for Damion, he got in the short end of the stick twice. He was dejected, he was down, but he did not give up. He decided to attend East Mississippi Community College in hopes that Ole Miss would go ahead and bring him back in the following year once they had more scholarships available. He was in contact with Ole Miss coaches and they told him if he could perform well there the following year, he'd be an Ole Miss Rebel. So Damion decided to bet on himself. He took the JUCO offer, went to East Mississippi Community College, but things did not go exactly as he'd planned. Damion had decided to go to an unknown junior college in the middle of Mississippi, focus on football, and that's it. But shortly after he got there, he sees all these cameras, and of course, it is the Last Chance U film crew. When Damion decided to go to the school, he had no idea that this was going to be a thing, but at this point, it was what it was. The show ended up blowing up and features players that I've covered on this channel since the time the show actually came out, and still, of course, covered to this day. It turned those guys into high-profile stars, which could be a good thing in some situations and could be a bad thing in other situations. In Damion's situation, him sliding under the radar and not really being a magnet for the cameras, I guess you can say kind of helped him in a way. While a lot of other guys were having all of their micro accomplishments and micro failures completely broadcast to everyone, Damion was kind of just able to slide under the radar. But the Last Chance U cameras were not the only reason that his first year at EMCC didn't go as he planned. On the field, the real reason he was there, Damion was pretty pedestrian. He ended up only making 4 catches for 71 yards in his first season. So when the season ended, Ole Miss took a look, was not impressed, and decided to go in another direction. Now his Ole Miss dreams are pretty much gone, and he's got 1 more year of junior college football to make something shake. His back was against the wall. This was the moment. That offseason, Damion went back to the drawing board. He came in more focused and ready to go and was able to turn in a solid sophomore season. 34 catches for 620 yards and 6 TDs. He didn't end up shattering the earth, and D1 schools were not phoning over him. But he did end up getting 1 D1 offer from Troy. It wasn't Ole Miss. Damion didn't care, it was an opportunity, he took it. When Damion got to Troy, he focused on furthering his skill set as a wide receiver. In 2 years at the school, he put up a total of 98 catches for 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. In his senior season, he led the conference in touchdowns with 10, and that was despite missing 2 games with injury. His college career was solid, but at a small school like Troy, it wasn't enough to get him on most scouts' draft boards. And if he was there, he was way at the bottom. Damion needed to make a statement at Pro Day. He measured in at 6'3", 204 pounds, great size for a wide receiver, but could he run? He recorded a 4.48 in a 40-yard dash, which was extremely solid, and he put up numbers he was definitely proud of, but ultimately, it wasn't enough to get him drafted. But unbeknownst to Damion, he had really impressed the Cincinnati Bengals coaching staff by being able to pick up concepts and play designs quickly. This, along with his physical ability, got him an invite into Cincinnati Bengals training camp. But Damion didn't come in like the typical undrafted rookie or even the typical first-round rookie. He wasn't making a ton of mental mistakes. He wasn't boom or bust each day of practice. He was always consistent, always making plays, and he stayed aggressive. Every day he was attacking the ball, making play after play, and staying at the top of the coach's mind. As a Cincinnati Bengals fan, I've been reading about this dude since OTAs. Who is the standout? Damion Willis, standout. Damion Willis, standout. Damion Willis, constantly. Still, the majority of Bengals fans and the Bengals media believed that Damion would be on the outside looking in to the 53-man roster. When All-Pro AJ Green went down in training camp, his would-be backups were unsurprisingly having a hard time filling that void. Third-year player John Ross, who's on the cusp of having a breakout season, was also injured throughout training camp, so two of the Bengals starting receivers missed the entire training camp. This created a key opportunity for undrafted rookie Damion Willis. Every day he was slowly climbing up that depth chart in front of guys who have been on the team for several years now, and we've been waiting to break out. They haven't done so. When the preseason games rolled around, Damion popped off the screen immediately, making contested catches in the first two preseason games. He looked explosive. He looked like he belonged there. By preseason game 3, considered by most to be a dress rehearsal, Damion was out there with the ones. Undrafted kids starting, and still he looked like he belonged, going for 55 yards and a touchdown in limited snaps. Still, it was preseason, but people definitely felt he'd done enough to make the roster. In what I'd have to call another stroke of luck, Damion happened to be coming out of college the same year that the Cincinnati Bengals were getting a brand new head coach. At 36 years old, he's an extremely young head coach, coming in with fresh energy and not just leaning the veterans. He's looking for the best players and not playing politics. Had Damion come in the year before, he probably doesn't even make the team, even if he has the exact same output. Shortly after the Bengals' third preseason game, new head coach Zach Taylor drops a bomb. The undrafted rookie, the kid who'd been passed over for college scholarships twice, the kid who was on Last Chance U but got zero shine on the show, that guy, the guy that went to Troy, the guy that was undrafted, he was gonna be starting in week 1 of the regular season. 4 years earlier, no Division I college even wanted him, and now he's gonna be starting in the NFL week 1 of the regular season. That escalated quickly. When Damion found out, he played it pretty cool, but he'd later admit that that night he definitely shed tears. Here's a quote from Damion. "It's like a dream come true, because I've always dreamed about playing in the NFL, and now that I am, it's a blessing. But I don't take it for granted because I know how hard it was for me to get here. I'm not gonna say I was overwhelmed. I wasn't saying to myself I need to do this or that, but I did feel like I had to make this play or this block every time I'm out there. I was undrafted, so I can't half-heartedly do anything. Each rep, I have to go hard, and I have to do what I'm supposed to do." In Damion's first NFL game, he drew a tough card. My Bengals traveled to Seattle in one of the hardest places to play in the league due to the 12th man's crowd noise. At key moments in the game, the weather was also unfriendly to the pass game as the rain was really coming down. Still, Damion was able to catch 3 passes for 30 yards, helping to move the chains in key situations. More importantly, he didn't commit any penalties and even drew a few penalties from Seattle's defense. The moment wasn't too big for him, and why would it be? He prepared himself along his long, twisting, turning road into the NFL. Of course, there was no way for him to plan out the exact route that he ended up taking, but he got there. And like Nip said, maybe he didn't always have the ultimate poise, but the key thing, you guessed it, he never quit. I'm no quitter, 'cause I'ma go